My name is Christine Gould. I'm the founder and CEO of GIGA Futures. We're here to make big, bold, brighter futures possible through innovation. And the focus of my work is in food and agriculture. I've dedicated my career and life to making a dent in this critically important space. And that's why I'm so excited to be moderating today's discussion with such a luminary panel of innovators and change makers. We're going to be looking, as the title suggests, at the nexus of food and water. And these, incredible people have been working at the front lines of these topics, whether that's through smallholder empowerment or Pacific Island resilience or plastic-free hydration. So really, all kinds of topics we're going to be exploring, but really through the lens of three areas. One is science, one is systems change, and the third one is storytelling. So let me set the context a little bit about why we need to be thinking about food and water. First of all, these two areas are critically important for human life and existence, but they're also inextricably linked. Our planet is known as the blue planet because we're a water-based planet, but 70% of all fresh water is actually used for agricultural purposes, whether that be for crop production using irrigation, for livestock, or aquaculture systems that can be grown in ocean systems or land-based ponds. So we are using water as an extraordinary rate to feed ourselves. And unfortunately, that's coming with some big costs, right? We know that we've exceeded now 7 of our 9 planetary boundaries, and that our food systems are accounting for $15 trillion a year in unintended costs to human health and the environment. This comes in the form of pollution, it comes in the form of biodiversity loss, and importantly, it comes in the form of costs to community resiliency. But we're here at a futurist conference not to talk about the doom and gloom, but to talk about what's possible. And again, to reframe the possibilities for future life on our planet through the lens of science, systems, and storytelling. So I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why you care about this topic of the food and water nexus. So let's start with you, Robert Oliver. Robert, yes, tell us about yourself and what you're doing.
Sure. So I founded a project about 7 years ago called Pacific Island Food Revolution. It was really developed to address the NCD crisis in the Pacific. That fundamentally, the Pacific people have shifted away from their traditional eating habits and consumption patterns, and there's many reasons for that. There's colonization, globalization, but the tsunami of processed food has had a dramatically bad effect on Pacific people's health. So the challenge I grew up in the Pacific, and I was like, wait a second, these are my friends.
Yeah.
And I was at the time, when I became aware of these numbers, I was a judge on a big, trashy cooking show called My Kitchen Rules, which is one of those nasty reality TV shows. And I was like, wait a second, everyone's watching this. I can use this to really lift the kind of storytelling and re-energize the original Pacific food system, albeit formatted for the modern era. Mm-hmm. So what I liked about it was I wasn't needing political will, development strategies. This is a revolution that's led by mothers and grandmothers and cooks at restaurants and universities and everyday people in their kitchens. So that was the appeal to me. That was why the entertainment approach was what I chose to do this with.
I love it. Pop culture meets agriculture and food systems.
Absolutely.
We need so much more of that. Yeah. Cherrie, introduce yourself too, an icon in the space.
Yeah, thank you so much for this panel, and thank you so much, Dubai Foundation, for really the invitation. So I'm Cherrie. I'm the founder of Agrea Agricultural System in the Philippines, as well as Agrea Foundation. I've been in the space for around 28 years. I was asked, looking about the future, but I was always looking from where I come from. I basically started teaching farmers at the age of 12 in a sugarcane farm in Negros, and I never used sugar since I was 15 because it's my little activism in the industry. I feel like the community is suffering to plant sugarcane and to produce sugar, so until now I don't do sugar. But then it really brought me to realizing that how do we make farming sexy? legacy? How do we change the narrative of agriculture? Because it's always connected to drudgery, poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. The very farmers and fishers who are producing our food are the ones who are actually hungry and most of the time malnourished. So I dedicated my life to working with them. My company has been working with around now 37,000 smallholder farmers in the Philippines. The produce of our farmers goes straight to BPO industries, cafeteria, international schools, shipping lines currently. And every day, we are feeding 80,000 people in the workforce. We call it nourishing the workforce while sustainably nourishing the farmers who are smallholders and fishers. So we work in different areas in the Philippines because island economies, Philippines has 7,107 islands. And what we're trying to do is how do we preserve our blue economy and our green economy together? How do we see the connection of water to terrestrial, to the land, because whatever you put to the soil goes to the water and it goes back, the ecosystem. So that's why I'm so interested to share whatever, we do in our company and the foundation in the Philippines to this very beautiful audience.
Amazing. And bringing a new face to what farming is. I've been working with young entrepreneurs in the agri-food tech space for decades, and I really do think what you said is very true. There's this kind of prevailing narrative that agriculture is a profession for old people wearing overalls and you don't make a lot of money, but we need to change that so we can bring a new generation in and new solutions. Sami, you're actually coming to this topic from a completely different vantage point. You're focused on plastic-free hydration in terms of single-use plastics and also microplastics. Tell us more about what your work is about.
Sure. So, I think when I started my journey in trying to reduce plastic waste, it came from my previous company, which was focused on providing clean energy into the grids. And I started a company in 2007 by the name of Enviromina, and that was the first solar company in the region. And it was a big uphill battle because what we were trying to do was initially sell power at a higher cost than what people were buying it for. Over the years, the cost declined and we saw incredible adoption of renewable energy in the region. And I came to the realization that there are so many use cases, and I think a few of them have already been exemplified, in which you can either be more sustainable or do better for your health and wellness without any kind of compromise. So we at Wisewell started the company with a real focus of producing water that is more sustainable, but at a higher quality to the end user without any kind of compromise in terms of cost, in terms of plastic waste, or in terms of the underlying user experience. And we're firm believers that sacrifice doesn't have to happen in order to do good.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've highlighted at Wisewell is we have something called a Liter for Liter program. Well, now it's actually called a Liter for 10 Liter program. So for less than 1% of our gross margin, we are able to develop water projects to the 2 billion people that lack water access globally and give back multiples of what our consumers are drinking every single time. And it goes to show that these big problems can be solved if private sector and technology participation are delivered efficiently and correctly.
Amazing. I want to ask the audience a question just to get a little pulse check of where we are with everyone, and also be thinking of questions you want to ask because we are going to open up the floor after our discussion. How many of you are working in or affiliated with food or farming? Raise your hand. Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you are conscious in making decisions about how you drink water, e.g. choosing glass or plastic-free options? A lot of you, great. Okay, super. So let's talk about the challenges, right? So Cherrie, I'd like to start with you. Let's start with farming. You said you're working with the green economy and the blue economy and trying to build the bridges between the two. I'd love to hear just a reality check of what you're facing day in and day out in terms of the challenges that you're seeing farmers need to address. And also, let's talk about like the planetary challenges that they're coming up against. So economic, environmental and social challenges. What's the reality check in the Philippines?
I think I would start with the environmental challenges. I'm not so proud of this, but our country, Philippines, is now #1 in the most disastrous country in the world, 3 times in a row. And 2 weeks ago, we just experienced flooding and typhoon, and a month ago, we just experienced earthquake, massive earthquake. And every year, we have 20 to 21 typhoons affecting, the country. As I was speaking here today, I'm actually mobilizing 60 tons of rice to give to victims of typhoons, and that's really the challenge we're trying to address every day. Precipitation is so high, rain is so high, but all of a sudden there's like 6 months of drought, and then you have this typhoon affecting the islands. So these are like really massive challenge on environmental. On the economic side of things, there's a huge challenge as well on how farmers could have better value of their products, because most of the time the farmers are trapped in the system that the buyers are also the financier, also the providers of farm inputs, and they're trapped in generational debt. And I worked with a lot of these farmers. Currently, my Agrea Foundation is a nonprofit I started a year after I started my company. We're working right now with Bangko Sentral ng Filipinas, it's a central bank of the Philippines, on how to unlock financial inclusion of these farmers, by just like getting 3%, for example, bank support. But I realized in terms of equity and inequality, it started with how educated really are stakeholders. And I've learned that every time I talk to banks, they don't give financial inclusion to farmers, or it's hard to provide that kind of solutions because a lot of farmers, they don't even know how to read and write. Every month we work with around 2,000 farmers to onboard them on the banking system. And I normally hire teachers, childhood teachers, and preschool teachers to help us to help the farmers so that they're the ones signing forms. And another one, inequality, it's also because sometimes, the institution is so intimidating. A lot of the farmers didn't want to go to the bank. It's because when they enter the bank, it's like air conditioned, you need to dress up, you need to talk, you need to fill out forms. And I think we created a society that's just like unequal in itself. So what we're trying to do now is to really work with farmers where the tellers and the bankers are going to the farms, where they are, bringing their iPads and onboarding the farmers in the platform, rather than the farmers would go to the bank and sign up. So we're really like trying to reverse the process, and we're trying to work this in private banks in the Philippines and government banks in the Philippines, and our work has been acknowledged to address these issues. And speaking of the financial, I'm always a believer that if we connect the farmers to the market, we can definitely help the farmers, especially the smallholder ones, to actually feed 1/3 of the world's, supply, the 1/3 of the world's food need. What I mean to say is, for example, in the work that I do, I don't supply to supermarkets since I started my company because they pay very long. The farmers couldn't survive, and they're cash trapped, and they really miss cropping season. So what we do, I actually work a lot with chefs and nutritionists. Currently, we work with 27 chefs and 7 nutritionists because we redesign the food systems in the BPO industry. Because Philippines is an opportunity, we are the #1 business process outsourcing in Southeast Asia. You call, there's a Filipino answering your problem. If you have credit card problems, things like that. So for me, it's such a big opportunity. But when I went to the cafeteria of these BPO industries, they don't have very good and nutritious food served to them. Because most of the time it's subsidized by the company, so they get the cheapest possible food. When I was there, I said, I will not eat this food at all because this is so unhealthy. And these people are working almost 24 hours sometimes, and there's no available good food. So I said, I talked to the owner of this BPO industries and the catering companies. I think if you want to save these people who are contributing 21% GDP to the country with the BPO, we need to match them with the other one that contributes 10% to the GDP, who are the farmers and the fishers. So I work with chefs, nutritionists to reverse the process.
Yeah.
So we redesigned the menu, and the menu comes by redesigning it based on the cropping season in the Philippines. Since we have 20 to 21 typhoons, how can you design food menu that are growing based on season? So now you have good quality food, tastes so good and affordable. So the price per plate and the companies are buying it because you get good price when the production is good. So these are kind of the systems that for sure in the future we could replicate more and more. And I'm doing it like presently with my team.
Yeah, so what I heard is that obviously we're facing in the Philippines like physical constraints with so many islands and the separation between them, environmental constraints and the disasters that you've had to deal with, and then also some social and economic constraints. But the approach you're taking is actually to like really rethink the system and to say we have to break the models to make them meet people where they are and fit for purpose to get to the solutions we need. That's incredible. Rethinking the system is takeaway one, which leads me to you, Sami, because another great way to kind of create a new system or disruption is through technology and innovation. And this is where the space that you're in. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective around, what's the role of innovation to address some of these challenges, and what else is needed? Because it can't just be technology saves us all. I think we're seeing that play out in real time. So, yeah.
Definitely. I think it's technology, paired with the way we're used to doing things,
Yes.
right? And having disruptive change happening from a technology perspective, independent of getting us as humans on board, and as I think as cultures or societies is very challenging. So managing that disconnect is critical. And one thing, Cherrie, that you touched on, and where we believe technology can really be leveraged in putting in sustainable business models, is the decentralization of a number of different processes. So we at Wisewell are doing it in terms of water. Today, and I'll give a specific example, right? I think today, with a bottle of Fiji water, there is a container that is made out of hydrocarbons, literally oil and gas, so it's with plastic, that is shipped to an island in the middle of the Pacific. It is then filled with a finite resource of water, sealed, put back on a ship, and then delivered all over the world, giving you water that is far less healthy, far less sustainable, and way more expensive than what we can do today with not just today's technology, but even yesterday's technology. And so what we are focused on at Wisewell is, okay, well, in the household, what's coming out of a tap, whether that's in the Philippines, or New Zealand, or Switzerland, Canada, or Dubai, is probably somewhere between 90 to 99% there already. That 1% of filtration, of refinement, of upgrading the water to go from either a mediocre or a compromised user experience in terms of quality, flavor, texture, into an elevated user experience in terms of the right filtration, the right texture, and everything is already there. So the infrastructure pretty much globally exists. And so our goal is to just bridge that gap, the disconnect between the assumption that what I'm getting at the grocery store, or skipping the grocery store altogether, which I think you and I are looking at, or what I'm getting from a hospitality outlet or whatever, is only upgraded if it comes from a centralized source, right? A bottling facility, another country, or you name it. And the underlying truth is we get more when we are eating or drinking what is closest to us. And the same applies to water, the same applies to food. So really looking at how local can you be in terms of water consumption. Well, you could be as local as the closest sink in your household. And today's filtration technology will get you to a point where you're going to actually have a higher quality product than, I hope no one here is from my Dubai, but definitely a higher quality product than what I'm getting here. That's because it's fresh. It was just purified. It hasn't been sitting in a container stagnant for a long period of time. And of course, it's a lower cost and more sustainable. So what's stopping people? And that's kind of going from technology to the human angle. Well, we don't know that it's actually working. So if I install a filter of a random brand or kind of most of our peers out there, the underlying technology does not actually quantify or communicate the before and after of what's happening in the water. And so we leverage technology to help get a lot of people who are reluctant over the line. We have TDS monitors, we've got flow rate monitors, sensors, and connectivity in the machine, which tells you, this is your tap water quality before, this is your tap water quality, or your filtered water quality afterwards. This is exactly how much is left in each of your filters. This is the impact you've actually made in terms of plastic waste, health. This is how much you've donated back to those who lack access to water. Packaging that and communicating it, not just being a, lack of better term, dumb filter that just, you know, you hopefully that person calls you and says, 6 months down the road, your filter needs to be changed. Getting that over the edge is a leveraging of technology into, you know, our human emotion and human nature to really expedite that necessary change for the planet and for our own wellness with the implications of nanoplastics as well.
Amazing. So you came in, saw some nonsensical systems about how food and water is being, you know, centralized and transported in these like globally inefficient systems. Came in with fresh eyes and said, we can do better, we can localize, and we can use technology as a way to enable this, but also to bring people along on the journey because, yeah, seeing is believing. And I think we love as humans to have the wearables that show us the data, that show us the delta between before and after. But there's also this whole kind of inspiration aspect, which leads me to you, Robert. Like, you mentioned the word human nature, and I think at the end of the day, human nature trumps everything. It trumps rationality, it trumps, you know, data. And human nature is very influenced by, you know, culture and behaviors. And so this is a really important pressure point to put on how we can do better in the world. So I'd love to hear, like, what does it take to shift cultures, which are notoriously deep-rooted and hard to change and based on tradition and, you know, based on legacy? Yeah, how do you do this and tell stories?
I mean, I guess I would question the premise a bit of the question.
Please
because,
do.
Because, like, my whole kind of ambition is to revive a culture that was incredibly valuable, and it was incredibly aligned to the natural systems, and the way of life was designed around the majesty of nature. And I've been very reminded here in Dubai that us Pacific people, I'm looking for trees all the time. It's like we're so connected to just those simple natural experiences that we're finding hard to access here. But first of all, I do want to say one thing, and I want to say this to you guys, my Pacific buddies. We need her. We need Cherrie in the Pacific. So really good to see this, you know, these models and these prototypes and these innovators in different parts of the food system that we could look at collaborations. The other thing I want to respond to your question, Christina, is that the story of the food is the story of the people. So this is a deep spirit, epiphany, liberation space. It's not techno and it's not transactional. It's about opening people's memories and thus their dreams of who they are. People ask me what I do, you know, like very transactionally. Yes, I've got a project that's, you know, reviving traditional food systems and modernizing them, etc. But actually, what I think I do is I connect people to their beauty. And I've had so many experiences doing what I do where especially with young people who are in my system, go through this kind of epiphany where they realize that their culture is their cure. And it's profound for them. And when it's on screen and their relatives and their people who know them through some other connection see that as well, they feel it. So in a way, I'm not going for a head thing, I'm going for a heart thing. And to me, feeling is knowing. And that's really what I'm trying to do through the trashy form of entertainment that I've adopted to make this happen.
It's taking a modality and making it meaningful, I think, which, again, is a way to bring people on the journey. I was actually just in Boston a couple of days ago, and I was watching a talk at MIT, and the person who was presenting showed a very interesting Venn diagram, and it was the overlap of artificial intelligence, or human intelligence, natural intelligence, and ancestral intelligence, and saying this is kind of the paradigm for the future. If we can merge all of these areas, you know, there's a new type of possibility. And I wonder if you have a reaction to that, based on what you said. You know, it's kind of cultural resurgence, but is there a role for technology to meet tradition and science to meet systems that can take us to something new?
I'll speak to that at the end.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Hold that space.
okay. Well, okay, that sounds good. I mean, I did want to kind of go into the next question, into these what if scenarios, right? So I wanted to ask each of you to really think about, what does a future look like where this food and water nexus challenge is solved? And what does that look like and feel like, and what actually will it take to get there? So maybe Cherrie, starting with you, if you could take us on a vision, right?
Yeah,
2070, let's go to 2070.
For me, I think like in 2070, if we need to, reframe our thinking that right now our thinking is food and water are actually commodities. I want to challenge us to rethink that water and food are actually lifelines.
Yeah.
Lifelines. You can get them without money if you know how to plant it. If you're in Fiji, you're planting around. And I want to go back to that. It's because we have a farm school. I have a nonprofit, and 8 years ago, I got so tired because I work with farmers who don't even know how to read and write. And I said, we're talking about all this sustainability, sustainable development goals, and I'm talking to a person who doesn't know how to read and write and doesn't understand what I was talking about. So there's so much disconnect.
Yeah.
And I went back and I said like, oh my gosh, Cherrie, forget about what I learned in university and all over the world and all these conferences I attended. Let's focus on the need of this farmer. And after that, I said, I really want to dedicate my life to create a business that is not transformational, not transactional. And what does it mean? It needs to relearn and reframe what I think and really work with these farmers and how to make this farmer understand what I'm talking about and where to bring him and her from A to B. So we started with a farm school. And you know what? What's the most beautiful one in our farm school? You're not taught how to learn how to plant on the first 3 days. You're taught how to do gratitude and how to rethink if you're poor or not. So the first question is, are you poor? And the farmers would raise their hands and they say, we're very, very, very poor. And I would always say, close your eyes. I have several questions. Do you have a patch of land outside your house? Do you have chickens running around? Do you have coconut trees? Do you have bananas? Do you have a patch of vegetables? And then after 10 minutes, they opened their eyes and then they said I want to share what I saw. And I want to answer your questions when I was closing my eyes. I have a patch of land, I have bananas, I have this, I have that. So now, are you poor? I don't know now if I'm poor because I have all of this.
Yeah.
So I want us to also reframe our thinking
Yeah.
on this because we're so rushing into the future, but we need to address and feel and be present on each other's needs. That's why in my company, we always ecology of dignity. How do you build an ecology that dignifies humanity? I am human, I produce the food. You are human, you're consuming the food. I want the food that I give to you dignifies you, dignifies the people in the supply chain. So for me, when we talk about 2071, I still really couldn't fathom it. But for me, I want a reverse where so much dignity and transformation is food and food, that there's a reverse of meaning that food and water are commodities but lifelines. These are basic needs. And I want to reframe that the producers of the food are consumers themselves. So let's not forget that these very people, the farmers and the fishers are producing the food, are actually should be assessing the food that they produce. The first in the food chain, right? But
Yeah.
it's a crime against humanity that the producers of the food and the first line in the food chain are the last and the
hungriest.
least and the hungriest
Yeah.
and the most malnourished. So I want us in 2071 is a challenge to take action on how to reverse the process,
Yeah.
how to gain respect for each other, how to put dignity and transformation on all this kind of, going towards that.
I have two quick follow-up questions, if you don't mind. I love this reframing of transactional to transformational. And one question I have is there's a word that is all the rage right now in the agriculture space, and that's regenerative ag. So I'd love to hear how you would define that, and do you see a role for that in building these futures that you described?
Oh, this is so beautiful. Last year, we actually launched the 10th module in our farm school. It's about regenerative agriculture. And we tested it to 18,000 smallholder farmers for training. And it's so beautiful. It's being adopted. Because we feel like the world is so extractive. We extract everything from waters, from the soil. But I think the regeneration, we need to rebuild what we gotten from our water, what we gotten from our soil. We need to make our soil healthier so that we're also healthier, right? We need to really, I think for the stretch up to 27-1, how to regenerate it every day, how to bring back what we extracted.
To be better, yes. And in that context, I've heard regeneration starts with oneself. And my second follow-up question, just really quickly, is about the word scale. So much of what we talk about in the world is about how do we scale, how do we scale, how do we scale impact. I'm curious what you think the role of scaling will be in the future.
Oh, yeah. So we work with BPO industries, right? I work with one of the largest catering company in the world. They're present in 75 countries, and in the Philippines they're present. So we started feeding 20,000 people daily. Now we're at 80,000.
Okay.
Next year we're opening cloud kitchen to serve 300,000 employees. That some companies, they don't have their own cafeteria because it's real estate. So you need to deliver food. So that scale, we started with 20, and I actually started when this company said, oh, Cherrie, we don't do that. We just fly food from our neighboring countries because it's cheaper to fly food from our neighboring countries.
Right.
And I said, can you please talk to your client if they're talking about carbon credit? And then I'll meet you next time because I don't need your money if we're talking about importing food. I need you to talk about sourcing local. That's what Sami was actually saying. And then he went back to me the next meeting and he said, oh, my clients, I have 45 multinational clients, and all their investors are looking to cut carbon footprints. Now, in total, our data scientist said we have 74% carbon, and we need to put it at 34% in 3 years. I said, okay, now we're talking. Let's put that into action and localize it. So imagine we started with 20,000 people we're feeding every day. Our client won Sustainability Award globally in Paris. and after the awarding, he got 4 more clients. And then he called me, Cherrie, we're adding 20,000 people more in the cafeteria. And next year, they're opening a cloud kitchen. I said, I don't even know and understand cloud kitchen. But now I'm preparing onboarding 11,000 more smallholder farmers. The moment I get back, I need to visit these farmers again to onboard in our system. So I think when we're talking about scale, people needs connection.
Yes.
People wants to be part with a system that changes, that uplifts everyone, that no one is left behind. I think if you're walking and working your desk every day and you're seeing the calamity in the world, you want to create something, but sometimes you're so not in the capacity to do it. If you're given a capacity to do it, so why not? So I think I will not get tired of doing this because it's so inspiring to do it every day. And we feel like, wow, 300,000 people we're feeding next year with a cloud kitchen. I'm on to that.
I mean, absolutely incredible. And actually, you set it up perfectly for what I wanted to go to Sami. I mean, we're going to be talking about your vision, your what ifs for how to get to 2070, but you mentioned the word decentralization. And for me, this is like the new version of scale, is like digitally connected, a new type of decentralized infrastructure that can lead to this global impact, but still keep things locally relevant. So if you could talk about your vision, your what if, but also touch on decentralization as a new form of scale.
Sure. And I think we heard the word transaction and transformation. With transaction being a little bit vilified in the context of something being transacted, but in my opinion, transformation is thousands of little transactions, right? So we have to understand these steps of collaboration between policymakers, private sectors, entrepreneurs, technology, and all those involved. As long as the stakeholders have a kind of a vision of equality or a vision of sustainability or wellness, and there's an alignment, engagement across, I'd say, the entire ecosystem, from the funding environment through to the policymaker, through to the end users or those who need to be helped out, really need to be engaged in a very, very collaborative way.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to do that than to decentralize, because kind of centralized decision-making process inherently means the decisions are made in a room or a building, and very often they're not, they don't have their tentacles out, understanding all the different, implications or use cases of the application of whatever we speak of. So my heart, I'm very much a technologist.
Yeah.
I really do believe that technology independently can't solve all problems, but the right use and the right application of technology given in a democratized and decentralized fashion will allow for change in a much more rapid pace than again talking about how we can do it in the plans. And I loved what you said about the farmer trying to understand the SDGs. To be frank, me as the entrepreneur, I either get impatient or fall asleep when I hear too much about it, because let's just act.
Let's do it.
Let's do stuff, right? And I think again, one of the cores of being somebody who's done multiple startups and scaled multiple startups is you have to A/B test, all right? And you have to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, and continue doing so and iterate in a very, very efficient manner, which was capital efficient, which is time efficient, and which ultimately gets the input of kind of all the stakeholders, the users, the beneficiaries, the capital structures, the policymakers, in order to move in the right direction. So not to knock too much planning or not to knock too much anything along those lines, because it's critical, but ultimately I feel like a lot of the motion of progress to solve some of these big problems requires that first step of an individual or a business or somebody just to go do it, right? And again, it's easier to ask for an apology than it is to ask for permission. And I think that's kind of how we all have to just sprint forward to impose change. And I think that's how we're going to leverage technology and use cases, is not one big theme, one big change, but a lot of little learnings along the way in order to get to whatever outcome we would.
Well, and I think you mentioned some great words like decentralization and democratization as new ways to bring technology forward. I also think that it's very interesting to think about this experimentation and test, fail, learn, repeat methodology that's so endemic to the world of entrepreneurship, and how to apply that into something so complex and contextual and deeply rooted as food systems. It's certainly something I'm advocating for too, and I think that, building on kind of the shared narratives that we've touched on here, is like, how do you build these lessons in blueprints that can be shared globally, repeated, localized to whatever the needs are of the different, food systems, because they are so different everywhere. But we can, through digital connection, we can share those things to, again, scale impact. So really, really fascinating. I'm not going to let you off the hook on my question about the convergence of technology, artificial intelligence, and natural intelligence, and ancestral intelligence. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear about your vision for the future and how we get to 2070.
It's funny, when Cherrie said she started working with her stakeholders around imagining, I've been doing that as well. And I'm often asked to speak at universities, all that kind of stuff, and I've started inserting like a meditation into it.
Oh, nice.
Because we can give people examples of their food systems and talk about the logic and the frameworks, but to get them to actually feel it, you've got to create that like space, that kind of that experience for them. So I've been doing like a prayer type thing, and I've been asking people to imagine what their future food future looks like.
Could we do that right now? For 30 seconds, a minute?
We could.
We
could. Well,
we could try it.
Later. I mean, we could ask people to close their eyes and imagine what their food future looks like. What does it look like in your schools, in your hospitals, in your prisons, in your universities? What does it look like in education? What does it look like? Imagine a world where children are cooking with their grandmothers again, and the kitchen is once again the space for love and reconnection and memory. And what does it look like as we re-energize and revisit our traditions? And as we do revisit our traditions, we revisit ourselves, our deep internal selves. And as we do that, we heal. And the healing part is really, really enormous for me. I feel like this approach and this personalized, reflective, introspective approach is, you can open your eyes again if you want.
Thank you.
is the opportunity because people choose what they eat all the time.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to create a social movement around people's choices, that's the space that I play in.
Yeah.
I'm not not particularly working with big development strategies or even big thinking. I'm working with getting people to really love who they are and eat that way. And I just see, through my work, I see really beautiful change happening. And it's like one bite at a time. And everyone can do this. It's not, you don't need some great leadership strategy to make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. One bite at a time. I was envisioning when I closed my eyes, being in a kitchen with my grandmother, but kind of to your point, Cherrie, too, like getting some of these recipes. I have to say she wasn't a great cook, but she did make some great cookies, but also sharing with her some of the food tech innovations that I get exposed to and seeing maybe there's a way to blend. So back to my question.
So,
the Venn diagram.
Well, no, it's just a simple reflection, actually,
yeah.
is that because I've never been to Dubai before,
Yeah.
I've never been around these conversations, I've never been exposed to such proliferance and ingenuity around technology and AI, and even I'm way over my head all the time here, but it has made me reflect that what does it mean to be advanced? And a lot of what we're seeing here is this urban setting and this system and this incredible city with all this ingenuity. And yet last week I was in a village in the Solomon Islands in the middle of, quote, nowhere, which is, even saying that is a problem.
Yeah.
Where people have been living in a way that's deeply harmonious with nature. And that's advanced to me. I don't see any difference between what is advanced and what, and there's a lot of judgment and stereotyping, like often those people would be called backward, for example. Well,
right.
I just don't see that, and I see the opportunity here for like the wisdom of nature.
Absolutely.
To be merged with this ingenuity and this great passion and this brilliance around technology, and maybe that is a future that we want to aspire to.
I'm obsessed, yeah. And I saw a talk recently around like reframing human exceptionalism and actually reintroducing this humbleness of, we're part of nature and there's so much to learn.
We are.
Yes,
part of nature.
exactly. So we have just a couple of minutes left. I want to open the floor for one question before we go to closing remarks. Okay, we have two questions. Fast, yes. Nice.
Say it again. I'm Gustavo. I come from Brazil, and I'm very much honored to hear what you're saying. And we come from a land where capitalism is showing so much impact. For example, one of our greatest rivers was killed because of a dam disaster, a mining dam disaster, some years ago, and that generated so much chaos on water, indigenous communities, and so on. So my question is, how do we create alliances between the Pacific and Latin America on issues that we can work together?
Digital connectivity for global impact.
I did.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So excited.
Yeah. Any reflections on this, how we can create communities of change across the world?
I mean, I heard your question yesterday, by the way, and I've been looking for you ever since.
Oh.
But
Love it.
one thing that I've reflected on also here is that the model of we own the land is very different from the model of we belong to the land.
Yeah.
And that's almost the heart of the environmental movement, if you reframe it into a Western context. So that I don't know how to do it, but that deep psychic shift is what you're dreaming of. Yeah.
And
No answers, but we should all be talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can't change the past, but we can certainly learn from it and elevate new voices and new perspectives in how we're designing interventions for the future. So in, thinking through, I mean, this is also something in our pre-call we were talking about. I mean, the water use decisions now that cities and governments have to make between data centers and agriculture, it's very real. I've actually been consulting governments on this exact topic. And it's like, wait, you have to feed people in order to make the use of the data centers, even relevant. But again, if we need to rethink who's involved in those conversations and the communities and elevating and learning lessons from the past. And unfortunately, I think there's limited imagination. And a lot of the data center conversations are just about how do we maximize, revenues, and how do we build a concrete block on this parcel of land and apply water coolants. And it's like, could you reframe those to become controlled environment agriculture farms? You could reuse the CO2, you could reuse the water. Imagination can lead us to new paradigms. And I think, again, to your point, bringing in voices that have traditionally been excluded. I saw one more question here, Priyanka. A food tech innovator, actually doing incredible things.
Firstly, working? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the panel. Super interesting. I have thousands of questions,
Oh.
but I'll probably stick to one. So we are talking a lot about decentralization. We are talking a lot about food security, geopolitics. Think about everything and that affecting every single person in this whole place, which is food. So if you had to bet on technologies, because I think in food, yes, there's about marginal farming to one extreme, and the other is technology. And we don't want to make each one a villain of the other, but we really want to create food for everyone using as much as empowering the farmers while also building for new technologies. So if you had to bet on innovation and technology and name one technology that you would like to place your bets on, what would that be and why?
Ooh.
I don't need to be, I thank you so much, Priyanka, for that question. You know what? It's very basic technology that we are actually implementing. Is very impactful, agroforestry. Because, we're talking about all this, planting forest, right? But we need to also redesign of how do we plant forest?
Yeah.
Do we plant forest that we can also eat, or animals around us that we care should also eat? We should also rethink that we should not just plant forest for timber. We really need to do agroforestry where you don't need to cut forests for timber, but you need to grow forests for food that also serves, the greenery that we expect. So it's very simple. It's being adopted for sure globally. I was just in Brazil, and it's the kind of thing that actually now being promoted, and even in my own country, in the farming communities that we work. This is something we even also do it in mangroves ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because one of the islands we are working now, we are now at 4,800 hectares of mangrove that we planted since 2014. And we create this still agroforestry model, but now embedding even the soft-shell crab and the shrimps in the ecosystem, and even bringing people into the mangrove at night to see the fireflies in the mangrove, for them to really help take care. So when you do all this kind of agroforestry that invites the birds, the butterflies, everybody, people started to care. And if people started to care, it's love in action. And
Love
how
in
we're
action.
talking it,
Yeah.
love as a verb, right? So for me, it's such a basic, powerful model.
I was just texting with someone who was at COP30 in Brazil, where they just announced an agroforestry living lab.
Oh, wow.
So it's actually kind of a super exciting, I guess, innovation forward approach to agroforestry, where they're going to be building the bioeconomy solutions together with innovators and entrepreneurs to take agroforestry, again, into the future of new possibility. Exciting stuff. One more question I saw. Yes. Yeah. And then we'll be around to answer, and connect.
Kia ora. So I have a background. I'm from the Maldives, so a small island country, and I grew up half in New Zealand, half in the Maldives, so the connections are there. I have a million questions as well, but what I wanted to share was I have a foundation that works on the intersection of climate action and cultural heritage, and then going into, it's named after my maternal grandparents' island, which is almost 2,000 years of living history. Our hectares of mangrove land is 0.7 7 hectares, so it's very tiny, and we're trying to implement farming, and it's a farming island, and many are like that, but we don't have the scalability, I suppose, and we have a massive logistics challenge that, it's more expensive to get these things even to the resorts and hotels that are in the country. So I guess I wanted to ask about scalability and having these conversations of local, but then also being subsistence islands and island ecosystems, and how do you balance that kind of, very delicate balance?
Yeah, I think I would love to answer that. I think you need to also reframe what scalability is all about. Scale that you could feed the population or the island, or scale to bring financial support to the island. Because, like for example, in the mangrove ecosystem we work, it's called the island of Siargao. It's a surfing capital of the Philippines. And, it's Condé Nast's most beautiful island for the past several years. And we work with 4 small islands, and they take care of this mangrove ecosystem that reach us to 4,800 hectares of mangroves now. One of the islands that we're talking now, they have around 3,000 population. But they need to get water from the mainland. So they have boats and boats carrying fresh water to provide. So we partner with a solar water company that actually put solar in one of their facilities, so the women could process the fish from the sea that they catch, and then we sell it to hotels and restaurants. So now we're connecting them to 186 hotels and restaurants in Siargao Island. And what's the most beautiful part here, the chefs are so into this.
Yeah.
They want to source local. They want to kind of support in this movement. And then it's run by women, this island, and then so it's something that you can scale. So by this December, the entire solar is installed. They do processing of the fish so that they solve the post-harvest facility, for food loss. And then they have increased the value of the fish because they do sardines and some other processed food. But at the same time, because it's fishing, so they only have limitation on the fish, we are now teaching them how to plant vegetables on containers because the saline soil is not conducive for vegetables. So they do container farming so that they have the balance of vegetables. You can come and visit if you like to learn.
Blueprints we can all be inspired by. Thank you, everyone. We'll be around to answer your questions.